Very cool. Yeah, I have a Who Am I slide next, but just really quickly, my name is Dan Borges. I've been working with CCDC and CPTC for a long time. So this presentation is kind of very specific to those two competitions. It's how to succeed at those. It's kind of um, like insider baseball a little bit, like tips how to train and prepare for these things. And then my next slide has a little bit more of who I am if you want to jump to that. Thank you, Cheryl. And then the idea is I have like specific question time at the end, but it's fairly interactive and I speak fast. So I don't know if we have a setup for questions like this, but maybe just like write down questions if you have them and then we can revisit them or go back towards the end.
Yeah.
Um, Here's a little bit more of my background. A few years ago, I wrote a book called Adversarial Tradecraft in Cybersecurity. Uh, it's a book that focuses on these competitions as well as focusing on like what do you do when you're actually at a computer with an adversary on the computer. In this presentation, there's some tricks as well from that book that'll show you how to kind of like get the upper hand or change the landscape to your advantage, which is a big theme of this competition or this presentation, like understanding the landscape and how you can leverage that. So as it says there, I've been part of CCDC for a really long time. I'm part of the core red team, and on the next slide, you'll see things are changing a lot, and I'm part of the group that's going to be like putting on CCDC in the future. So that's the next slide, but I want to touch more on here first. So I also run the at-large CCDC red team, which is the virtual region, and I use that as a feeder for people that want to get into penetration testing or red teaming. The only caveat is you still can't be in school, but once you're out of school, that's totally volunteer. It's very open, and anybody can join that and red team with us from their house. And then if you do well there, I usually have invitationals to the national red team where you can meet other red teamers and do the national event with us. But the only caveat is you have to be out of school because I don't want to deal with like insider issues. Done a lot of DEF CON presentations and workshops. I've been part of a lot of different like hacker groups. It's a big theme in this presentation is like teamwork, but throughout your career, you'll meet a lot of colleagues that are really, good at different things. And I highly encourage you to like form groups with them, form teams. Maybe it's formal teams like CCDC or CPTC, or it could be informal teams, just like GitHub groups. And then do research together, work on tools together. Uh, it's gotten me a lot of DEF CON presentations. We've just made a lot of cool things, made a lot of great connections, um, and we'll look at some of that stuff. And then most recently, I was head of security at Scale AI for the last 4 years, which was pretty crazy. Scale AI is obviously like a big data sales and AI company in San Francisco, and um, security engineering was just like it was a lot of incident response, a lot of engineering guidance. Uh, and then I write a lot on my personal website. So Lockbox, if you go there, it's like a giant link tree to a bunch of other things. And if you go to like tools.lockbox, I have at this point like over 20 subdomains with different AI tools I've written, all for fun things. And one thing I wanted to mention, part of that, I have office hours on there, probably not for schoolwork or anything like that, but if you're ever in the professional field and you're encountering like a really difficult engineering issue or even like a personal like growth issue, like how do I get from normal security engineer to senior engineer? I do consulting there, so uh, you can pay for some of my time, and then I'll just meet you and we'll talk about like actual work issues and work through them or set you up with strategies or engineering plans. Um, but that's all there on my website. And then lastly, I'm working on another book which will be released next February called Securing AI Systems, and it's in pre-release right now with O'Reilly. So yeah, we can talk about any of that stuff after, and then it's highly relevant to the presentation because I've been doing CCDC forever, wrote a book on it, and I'm a founder of CPTC. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is kind of what I wanted to talk about up front, like little disclaimer. So CCDC got transferred from CIAS, which is the Center for Internet. I'm not exactly sure what it stands for, but it was run out of San Antonio. And that was Dwayne and Kevin and all the guys that have run CCDC for 20 plus years, 27 years, I think, is as long as the brand is gone. Um, and their grants ran out a few years ago, and they were basically floating on corporate sponsorship. And I don't know if people are familiar with like the legacy of CCDC, but basically Raytheon paid the bill for about 10 years. That money ran out about 4 years ago, and it's hard to throw these events. And they were getting a lot of pressure from the school and even CIAS as an organization to kind of transfer the expense or drop the program. They thought it was a really important program, so they looked for another group of people to take it over. Uh, Alex Levinson, who worked with me at Scale and Uber. He started a group called NCRF, which is the National Cyber Readiness Foundation. It's a nonprofit with the goal of trying to lift up cyber skills around the country, very specific to the US. And they transferred the project to him. So it's at a whole new website now. You can see that CCDCIO, that's his domain, but it's official. He has all the branding and the trademarks and all of that. So he's going to be throwing the competition this year. And that's why I say, like, I think a lot of this stuff will apply. But it's my small disclaimer that his whole goal is to get the competition ready for the future so that it's AI forward, so that people can use more tools, so that it's more so that the competition remains relevant as technologies advance. And we're not just playing attack defense competitions if that's no longer relevant skills. They still are relevant skills in my opinion right now today. But I think Alex, it's good under his stewardship because he's very forward looking. Um, so small disclaimer, this stuff could change. I'm not in the driver's seat and there's somebody new in the driver's seat, but I'm very close to him. And for now, it's all similar. And then CPTC has also been on their own journey where they separated from RIT last year, which was a very big thing. When you run these competitions and you're associated with a school, a lot of your funding goes to the school. And RIT, CPTC was very intermingled with RIT, and it was very hard to separate us from functions of the college. So that was good that that happened. They became an independent organization. I think they may actually run for the last 12 years. The finals have been out of RIT. I think they're actually changing the HQ of the finals, like where that's going to run. But I think that's the only like material difference that matters to players. Otherwise, it's the same people that founded it, all the same organization. They just have better stuff for donations and taxes now with the new organization. Go to the next slide, please. So yeah, small disclaimer: things are changing, but it's all good. So this is a fun slide. Throughout this whole presentation, I was experimenting with Banana 3, which is Microsoft's Gemini image model. And this slide was really funny because like Banana 3 can make really good slides. You just have to, there's like a bunch of different tools for it. But in the image generation tool where I was, there's a slide option. And if you click that, it actually makes the whole slide, but as an image. So that's what this is. So I originally had like things crossed off. It's not the place you want to make slides. There's another tab further up that does better slide generation. But this is like an AI generated slide. Um, I think there's value in the slide, so I kept it. They're not CTFs. Take this slide with a grain of salt, but there are defined vulnerabilities actually in CPTC. That's why I underlined things in the left column. And then one thing I did want to talk about in the right column, I'd say that the top 4 points there all hold true. There are real world business environments. We do connect all the services, so it's a highly interconnected environment. Speaking to stakeholders actually really matters, and we have people playing different roles in the company, so there's different people to speak to in that sense. And then the goal of a lot of CCDC and CPTC is proving or like de-risking a system. And then the thing I really wanted to talk about is at the bottom. So I did the scoring rubric for CPTC a few years ago, and it may have changed. I think they might have actually taken some of this out. But at one time, regulatory and compliance angles were explicitly in the scoring rubric to talk about, like if it was a payment card system, you would be remiss not to mention the PCI DSS, which is like the payment card industry standards that affect anybody that takes credit cards. Um, but I don't think the students should be experts in these things. And it's really important that if you're not an expert in something, not to like speak to it like you are, but just mention it, like, oh, here's something you should review later. It may be applicable to the situation. Um, but I find like students always took this either in one of two extremes. They would either not talk about it at all, or they would go forward and be like, you're going to get fined all this money because here's all your violations. And it's like, that might not be accurate. So I bring it up just to say, like, it's something you should mention. It's something that could score you points if my rubric still holds true. Uh, but don't go overboard on it. And I think one of the themes are like, don't embellish things you don't know. Like, speak to what you know and put that in terms that you can speak to it well rather than speaking outside of your terms. Next slide, please. So this is like my version of that slide. Not as pretty,
I
but
think it's just as pretty.
thank you, thank you. Um, so what I would say are there are technical challenges to solve. Like, you don't want to be confused and think it's purely business. There's a lot of intended vulnerabilities. Back in the day, we used to put a lot of very intentional exploit paths. Like, you have to exploit this thing, and then it'll let you go to this thing, and then there you can get credentials to get the big thing. Um, Throughout our development journey, we found like explicit exploit paths don't work as well because like we're thinking one thing and then students' headspace is just somewhere different, and then they don't find the like narrow trail of breadcrumbs we made. So now a lot of CPTC and even CCDC design are things are very interconnected, but they're just riddled with holes. So there's a lot of ways to travel through the things, and that's what I mean by incidental technical challenges. There's probably ways to pivot through them that the designers haven't even thought of. um, but there are actual explicit technical challenges that the designers have thought of and have put into the environment that if you find are like obviously points, and then will also make the game designers happy because they're like, oh, they did the thing that I was hoping they did. So look for those, exploit those. But I guess the point of this slide is that those technical challenges aren't the point. That's not where you should get lost. Just know that they are there, and that is like the hoops you have to jump through. Um, the point, I'm going to jump down two slides or two bullet points, the middle one. Uh, the point is how you communicate the findings. That is really the point in both of these competitions. And even in like, I'd say the working world, it's all about framing it such that you can reduce risk. It's about framing it such that it's clear and easy to communicate. Oftentimes, especially in the business world, people want you to reduce very complex situations down to like binary choices that they can make, right? Like, you can spend this money and do this thing or not, and this is what you live with. Um, and I would say that is a very good skill to have, being able to reduce the complex situations down to levers that executives can pull. Um, in CPTC and CCDC, I think you want to wrap it up a little more nicely. Um, Another lesson, just quickly from my working world, uh, oftentimes, especially in CPTC, you're supposed to present the risk and not solve it. But in the real world, um, just pointing out problems isn't as helpful as it is in pen testing or these games. And in the real world, it's not only do you want to point out the problems, but you want to come with a bunch of proposed solutions. Otherwise, you're kind of just like I don't want to say like a noisemaker, but it doesn't really help as much. Like, issue identification does help a lot, but you really want to say like, here's the risk and here's what we can do about it. Here's several different ways to resolve it. And if you show up with those solutions and those options, you're infinitely more valuable than somebody that just points out issues. Um, so I think framing it in a way that gives people like just nice lever pools is the way I think of it. Like CEOs driving these giant mecha corporations, right? Give them levers to pool options, things to decide. Um, the challenges are very open-ended too, which is very unique about these games. So there's tons of creative solutions to all of these. Every year, students will come in with solutions that we never intended, and solve them in a number of creative ways. I'll give you a quick example. One of my favorite years from CCDC, one of my first years that I was playing, I think it was Central Florida, UCF, but they got a VoIP phone and then they used their VoIP phone as a simple Linux interface because it had IP tables and snort. And they were able to route all of their traffic through this VoIP phone and use the VoIP phone as a firewall rather than like changing a bunch of their services. It was really cool. And then they had snort set up with auto banning and they were able to like automatically block a lot of traffic. Very creative, very good solution. The red team then also got creative and we spoofed a bunch of internal UDP packets that were sourced from their internal systems. So we couldn't get the responses back, but it did trigger the Snort IDS and they banned a bunch of their own internal systems. So very creative both defensive and then offensive solutions that you might not see in the real world in these environments. Um, Similarly with CPTC, I remember we had a Rocket Chat server one year and we had it between both regionals and finals. And in between those two events, the team downloaded open source Rocket Chat, found a unauthenticated vulnerability that gave them full access to it, and then came to finals with an O-Day in their back pocket and was able to get just unauthenticated access to Rocket Chat. Super innovative, really cool, gave them a lot of access. And I think nowadays with AI and AI driven vulnerability discovery, like would actually be really easy. Um, Next slide, please. So this is kind of what I was speaking to a little bit there with the VoIP phone and knowing the terrain. The point of these competitions is to create this fairly typical like conflict or computer um uh like offense versus defense or just very typical scenarios. But what the game creators are doing is each year they're putting it in a different environment. So they're really making the game based around the environments. And if you can play to that, I think you'll do much better. Um, CPTC, this is very classic. But if you can understand the environment, you will very quickly understand what is important to them and what has high impact in that environment and what really matters to them. Just some like really quick classic examples. The one year we did an election service, the most important thing to us was election integrity. Was making sure that the election results we had were accurate, verifiable. If our systems went down for a little bit, that was bad, but not as bad, let's say, as a hospital where uptime is critical for safety and like patient life. So two very different environments, and you could have the same vulnerabilities in both of them, but depending on the systems, if it supports the election versus like if it was critical healthcare, would have different impacts. So that's where I say like if you know the environment, you can really find things that speak to the environment. And then the same thing with like CCDC. You heard the VoIP phone example. That's a great one where you can use the environment to create friction for your adversary. I've also seen CCDC teams host honeypots that have like fail to ban or IP table auto banning on those. So that creates a lot of friction for us as the red team. We'll see it later, but there's a lot of common issues that we experience, and then we just automate them. So we have all kinds of scripts to like rapidly change our IP addresses. We have a an entire thing we call BorgNet, which has thousands of virtual interfaces spread across a whole class B that like lets us basically jump through our own little localized version of Tor, so we can come out of all these IP addresses. But we've had to create all these tools because students create so much friction for us that we had to get around it in a very easy way. But the point is creating the friction because the friction does slow us down. If we don't have the tools ready for it, it makes things more difficult. Another classic example of like CCDC creating friction for the red team. A lot of teams, when they go to hardened boxes, will remove operational tools that aren't necessary for those machines. So they'll remove wget, they'll remove curl. Sometimes it breaks systems, but we've had people remove sudo. It absolutely breaks systems. Um, we've had the one I hated the most is for years I had a total PowerShell kit on Windows, and I don't think they removed PowerShell, but they would move PowerShell all over the system. That became very difficult. Had to start calling like just internal libraries to run PowerShell. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of ways you can be creative in the environment that maybe you couldn't do in a real environment that create a ton of friction for both the red team and attackers in general. Like blocking egress is a great one. You're basically changing the shape of the server. It can no longer communicate outbound. It probably doesn't need to. Uh, and it'll prevent a lot of C2 callbacks. It'll change the way the red team has to interact with the servers. Um, and then communication is the goal for both of these competitions, but we'll touch on that in later slides. And then the bottom one I think is a big one, but I think like a lot of what you do in the competition should be rote. Like it should be fairly regular. You should have well practiced commands. You shouldn't be like studying crazy techniques and trying to pull them off during it or trying a whole new plan. Stick with your game plans. Um, this is really saying like you should prepare and eat well and sleep well. It doesn't help to stay up all night and do something crazy the day of the competition if you're going to perform worse. And yeah, like I'm all about going back and writing tools and doing lessons learned. Where did we fail that we can do better next time? That's where I kind of say like win through preparation. Like note where you didn't do so well and then take another attempt. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, might have to speed up too because got a lot of slides. So here's just some quick tips on like these are the things that really matter in both of them. These are the things that are actually scoreable. And for CCDC, this is a grain of salt because Alex is changing the scoring rubric a bit. But uptimes are scored, injects are scored, compromise reports are scored from the red team. Two ways that the red team can compromise you. One is we hit data stores, specifically like databases, anything with like PII, credit cards, anything that would be valuable in a data breach. Those are big confidentiality point losses. Uh, a lot of teams don't differentiate between those and then like a normal integrity loss, which is we just have the ability to execute things on a machine. So if you could prioritize that and lock down databases or lock down data stores, uh, that could prevent large losses of points. That said, it's difficult because there's usually two or three ways to get to the data. And then obviously, this is my book, but most of the time the data exists because you're using it somewhere. So it always kind of has to be accessible, whether it's in a web app or there's some human user that needs to access it. So completely locking it down is very difficult. We talk about that a little bit later, that like obviously these systems still have to be usable. Um, so yeah, creative hardening strats I've seen win games. People bring in really good tools. They'll maybe take their systems offline for the first few minutes and then apply these really strong tools. And those hardening strategies have taken teams very far, especially if it's technologies that are like unique to that team that we're not dealing with across the board. Back in the day, we've had teams roll out really strong app locker policies that have messed us up. We've had teams roll out custom Linux EDRs that have messed us up pretty hard. Obviously, I'll have a bunch of tools later, but there's some really good custom Windows kits that, depending on the red team tools you're using, are extremely effective. Um, and then I just have to mention this because I've seen a lot of teams just lose on this. Um, Avoiding penalties, I've seen it more than once. Some penalty that a team has done, whether it's like a scope violation or like some kind of drama thing, but more than once I've seen penalties be the reason a team got second and not first. So just be on your P's and Q's, be professional. Uh, really it's that. Make sure your scope is right. Um, Even if you make a mistake and go outside of scope, a lot of times, especially in CPTC, because I did this whole scoring rubric, there's an entire thing um, where when you make a mistake or make a penalty, it's called educational opportunity, and you have a opportunity to earn back up to like 60% of the points you've lost by the way you handle that error. So even if you make a mistake, handle it professionally, you know, accept it, move on, and a lot of times you can win those points back by the way you handle the error. And I've seen that being the difference in first and second a bunch, which is kind of wild. Um,
So penalties in like not following the rules or
yeah, exactly. Like
okay.
scope violations. It's hard to describe, but it can be any number of things.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, exactly. Like rules violations. And like I was saying, even when that happens in CPTC, it's written into the scoring rubric. It's called an educational opportunity, and you have an opportunity to earn like
I
half
do
the.
love that.
Yeah, yeah, because it happens in the real world too. And we've always said, at least I've always said in my career, and I've leveraged it several times, but like, don't let an incident go to waste, right? If so, I've been in these like really large consulting engagements where there's like 4 or 5 consulting groups. And I remember one time we had a guy in my group run an Nmap scan, and he ran it like on the fastest possible settings, and it tanked the network. And it was at a large bank, and it dropped a router because it was doing like SNMP scanning. And at the time, that was very high impact on the CPUs of these routers. Um, and the router started dropping traffic, and the bank called this huge meeting and brought all the pen test firms in and was talking to all of us. And my firm, even though we made the mistake, we actually won the contract later, and we turned it into an opportunity. It, we were like, hey, why don't we define standards? Why don't we create a set way that everybody scans and create network rules like we can't go over this many packets or this certain bandwidth, um, that all these groups have to follow. Because right now there's no standards, and like, yeah, we're getting the finger wag for knocking the system over, but wouldn't it be a better system if we all knew what those limits were? So in that situation, we turned a bad thing and we created rules and we created a system such that the bad thing couldn't happen again. And that's actually a win in many ways. So it's you know especially true in security. Like, don't let bad events or opportunities go to waste. There's often a way to like turn those around or at least handle them gracefully. Um, cool. Next slide. And then, yeah, the bottom line is serve the business. This is true in these games as it is in life. I've seen a lot of people struggle in their career. They like think of this idea of security absolutism, like we have to fix all the vulnerabilities or everything matters. And oftentimes everything doesn't matter. What matters is what matters to the people with the money. Like, you're working for a group of people, and what matters is what matters to them ultimately. Um, so yeah, basically understand what's important to them, and then you'll understand what's important. Uh, it's not perfect security. It's rarely ever perfect security. Like, that is probably the last thing that matters. What matters is making them feel comfortable, and you getting paid and having a good job. And maybe if you want to take it a step further, like some research or something else. But very rarely are things like absolutes, and do you have to worry about every single thing? Just, you know, find what matters to the organization, and that is what will really matter. Next slide, please. Cool. So we're gonna start to get into like CCDC specific stuff. This is hopefully I give you guys good technology or tips here, and then we'll get into CPTC specific stuff, and then I have just a few like final communication ideas. Um, but these are like the core run book. Um, I'll have the slides publicly available afterwards, but this is kind of the stuff you should practice day in and day out. I put it right up top because this is like our number one. We just rock teams with this all the time, but they forget to change default creds. In multiple places, there's unique creds in the web app. There's unique local users. There's domain creds, or if they're using any kind of like SSO or one identity, Active Directory, all of those like domain style network creds are unique from local credentials. There's database credentials, data stores, API credentials. So right there is 4 unique like locations of unique credentials across the environment. And those local ones are potentially across every system. You may have local users that are shared between systems. They could be Windows, it could be Linux. So there's a lot of default credentials to change, and a lot of teams come in with this pre-scripted, which is really good. A lot of teams will execute well on this, but miss one or two locations. And then once we get a foothold, the other thing is then rotating credentials throughout the life of the system. We are very big on like key logging as a red team or stealing credentials. So don't assume because you've changed credentials once, your credentials are good for the rest of the competition, especially if you're reusing credentials across systems. Always best to have unique credentials per system because it just slows our lateral spread, and that's been very effective. Like sometimes there are systems where we have keyloggers and we'll get a certain amount of access, but we're not able to spread around the rest of the network, and that's extremely effective. Um, and then another good point to protect, we'll probably look at this somewhere else, but is like privilege escalation on the systems. If you can lock down sudo, or you can lock down the ability from us to go from user land to root, that greatly hinders our ability to execute on the machines. Uh, on both Linux and Windows, userland is a pretty good place to be as a defender or a security engineer, because there's not much an attacker can do. They can do like resource exhaustion, they can maybe access some stuff or try to privesk, but userland is pretty secure in my opinion. Um, if you can harden the rest of the box and they can't privesk from it, it's not the worst thing. Uh, Identifying scored services, turning off unnecessary services is a huge one. Um, don't know what else to say about that, but like it just reduces your attack service. Obviously, you have to run certain things like web apps because they're scored services. If you can reduce it just down to that, there's way less stuff we can attack, and then that's all you have to focus on. To the point that like a really good tip is like if you do need administrative services like SSH, RDP, uh, any of that stuff, really anything that you need to access and configure a machine. You may not need it, but if you do need it, it's best to always firewall those off just to your operational ranges. So that way, like, I can't even access them unless I pivot through your workstation, which we'll do, but it's super difficult. Um, so so that's just a good tip, because then it's like they're off, but they're still on for you, which a lot of people still need. We'll look at it later too, but I actually recommend using technologies like Salt Stack or configuration management or like some kind of EDR, and then just turn them off completely, right? Like that's how you administer the machines. Or if you really have to, you'll power the machine off or fiddle with the disk. But those services can come back to bite you. Very often we'll backdoor SSH completely. Like we have our own SSH server we'll put in there. We'll backdoor PAM, anything where there's authentication, we'll try to get credentials out of it. So even if you're using it just for you, if we have a foothold in the box, we may backdoor it in some way. Um, Protect core deployments. This is like in both competitions. Previously, I've seen things like it's running Waza on every endpoint, and then we get access to the Waza controller, and we're able to execute commands on every endpoint, which has been great. Or Active Directory, like obviously that's very juicy. If you have all your machines domain connected and the attacker gets access to Active Directory, that's like access to all those machines at a very system level. Um, yeah, so anything that has widespread touch or code execution on multiple machines should obviously be high value for you to go secure. Uh, let's see. And then, yeah, basically, I think I'm like bubble six down, go machine by machine, just individually prioritize machines, what has high valued score services on it, go into that machine, and then just start. We'll look at it later, but like LinPs, WinPs, privilege escalation suites, hardening suites, and then just start reducing the attack service on that machine, change the credentials. And then I've always said just go system by system. It's what we do in big IRs too. We go system by system. We just do dead disk forensics, and then we write up a timeline, and then we show how they're all, you know, I say interconnected, but really how the attacker spread through the systems on that massive timeline. And I think that methodical approach works really well in these competitions, because once you lock a machine down and you get like a good clean snapshot of that, it's very difficult for the attacker to get back in. Um, so being methodical really does pay in these events. Um, and then, yeah, don't lose track of the goals, specifically in CCDC. You want to be communicating status, you want to be performing IR. The compromise reports, the IR reports, are one place that I see a lot of teams leave points on the table. You can get a lot of points back for red team compromise, and a lot of teams don't seem to do this. Uh, and completing injects. You have to do that point evaluation. Sometimes you just let the attacker live there because you have a more important inject that's due in an hour. So uh, these are some of the priorities as you come up with your like training regimen or whatever you're going to do. I would revisit this list and potentially um, like make some of these more automated or practice these things. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is again like more of a minute zero kind of technical list, and it's a little bit of the same thing. So things I would do minute zero are I would go, and I do this on the red team, but I have a spreadsheet of every host. I have a spreadsheet of every service it's running on it. I have a fully agentic automated blue team. It's the first thing it does is it goes through and it baselines every system. It tells me what is it running before it starts to harden it. And then it'll go through and change a lot of the default credentials. It'll start to shut down unnecessary services uh, and perform a lot of this work. DNS and Active Directory recon is usually really big. Those, like I said, are systems that underpin a lot of other systems. I was playing pros versus Joes once, and there's this classic DNS denial of service vulnerability in your DNS resolver in that competition, and it just hits you like a truck because it's one packet, your DNS server goes offline, and then everything goes offline because they can't resolve your DNS. So any of those systems that have like downstream dependencies, very critical to look at upfront. Um, and then disable unnecessary services. If you read my book, there's one idea where we turn that on its head, where instead of disabling unnecessary services, I talk about a tool called artillery, where it opens up every single possible port and then messes with the attacker if they connect on ports that are like honeypotted ports. So again, that's where you can be very creative in these environments and kind of turn the traditional advice on its head. But if I were new at this and just practicing, these are like I'm a big brilliance in the basics kind of person. So this is what I would have my team practicing. Um, and then some more hardening and ops. This is like as you go through system by system, right? Like I do host-based firewalls, sudoers and admin groups are a huge one. Like I said, if you can keep us in user land, that's a very good position for you to be in. Snapshots are big, especially label your snapshots with like certainty, like system could be infected, system is not infected, system is clean, uh, this snapshot has issues, etc. And then we'll get to this later, but centralizing team notes and logs. I'm a big believer in that. I think people should run SIMs and centralize logs. Next slide, please. Try and get through this because we still have CPTC. And then here's just a quick tools list. A lot of these were written by students that competed at some time. Blue Spawn is by UVA, really good, like local hardening and IR tool. Chainsaw is local logs. You should have something for like rapid system triage. Then you start to get into like uh, threat specific tools. So if you're familiar with the CCDC Red Team, we have Raphael Mudge on it who wrote Cobalt Strike. Cobalt Strike is pretty big on some of the CCDC Red Team users. So then we have tools here specifically that like look for Cobalt Strike beacons or like threat specific tools. Um, and then like I was talking about, I think it's really good for people to run SIMs. I have a whole slide dedicated to it later, but Graylog is an open source SIM that's really easy to get up and running. Um, Configuration management framework, Salt Stack. I use it as a C2 one year. I'm a big believer in config management. It's like IT doing what hackers do better. So, you know, they you should use their tools. And then quick plug, here's a script from my book that I wrote that does full network quarantine. This could be really useful in CCDC, but it basically will lock a machine down to just your IP being able to access that over administrative channels. So kind of totally quarantines it, and then you can harden it, secure it, do whatever you need to do. And I think you can add more IPs there too. Like if there's like a scoring server you absolutely have to communicate with during this time or whatever. But I guess the biggest takeaway from this slide is there's a lot of existing tools that can really help you out there. And then, especially with AI enabled development, like you should write your own tools. I'm big on innovation and automation. And now more than ever, it's super easy. You just need an idea and then like a model subscription. So write your own tools, share them with your groups, practice with them is the most important part. Like find their edge cases. And yeah, there's some tools there too. Next slide, please. And then this is like a insider baseball tip. Uh, like basically the red team, especially the at-large red team, because we're so automated, because it's like um, I don't always get a lot of people that show up, but we go after low-hanging fruit. We have a lot of automation that really helps us. If you can fingerprint our automation, you can do really well against us. If you can reduce that low-hanging fruit, you can do really well against us. Um, yeah, there's some really good tips there on the right. Like if you can, especially at nationals, get out of the initial blast radius of some of our first attacks, you could do really well. It depends, but some really good tips here. I would review this slide later. Next slide, please. Okay, so getting into CPTC is a whole different ball game in many ways, but in many ways it's the same. So biggest things here are read the scope, read the rules, understand the environment, right? Like speaking to your customer is probably the biggest thing here. These are like the bottom ones are like just really good like pen test red team life tips. Capture evidence as you go, write your report as you go. Don't leave it all to the last minute. Um, capture I like to capture everything, right? Like capture all your findings, and you'll see it later. We have a when I do the team makeup, I talk about this one role that's kind of like higher level, where they're supposed to think about the big picture. But if you capture everything and you put it into this bucket, later you can decide what's important, and then later you can throw things out of the bucket, right, that aren't important and bloat the report. But do that higher level decision making later when you have all the pictures of the puzzle kind of thing. Um, but definitely capture as you go. Next slide, please. So again, just kind of like a technical minute zero checklist, things I would do. Confirm the scope. I'd get my network scans in. Identify assets. That's also like people, important resources, things that make the company move are probably good to put on that list. When I think about identifying assets, I think about like the old like pin board with all the strings connecting it, right? Like who runs what system, that kind of like mind mappy uh, exercise. And then we actually have this is where I would have a spreadsheet, but then there's map exposed services, web apps. Web apps are going to be big for you because they usually are interconnected to backend systems, have a lot of reach, a lot of rich functionality. Um, Run your scanners, validate scanner results, like especially in this AI world, right? Like you don't want to have fake findings. And then capture the evidence and start to track like what are your different assets that you're tracking. Um, Something that's not on here, but I would even break it into like layers or phases. Like if there's different network segmentations, start to like bulk all your information together around the two. Maybe draw lines of exploitability from how you can pivot through one to the other. Just in general, when you're talking about security engineering, those pivot points between the two networks or like any kind of trust boundary or authentication boundary, those are usually really high leverage for where you provide improvements or put security controls in the future. So note those, be like, hey, here's how I was able to get from one environment to the other. Those choke points are really where you can provide a lot of value in terms of like locking that down. Next slide, please. Oh, damn. Almost at time. Um, let's skip this
I
slide.
know,
Let's try to
unless
get.
we get thrown out. I don't see other people coming. So we might be able to have questions at time.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
because I don't
cool.
see
Very cool.
anybody standing in the hallway waiting to come in. So.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I'm going to skip this slide. A lot of good CPTC tools. The biggest one here is CPTC publishes all of their previous reports, and they also make it so that the teams have to publish their tools every year. So go look through the existing reports. Uh, Later, I'll have a link where I very specifically call out what I like in reports and then match them to a rubric. So that's a good post if like you need very explicit examples from reports of like this is good. But otherwise, all the reports are published and all of the teams' tools that they bring every year are published. And then some teams, I linked Stanford down there, they have templates for their reports, including an entire like latex tool, and all that's public. So I always say good artists steal, right? So next slide,
Borrow,
please.
borrow, imitate.
Yeah, recreate with
May not
AI.
steal.
Yeah, parallel recreation.
Here we go. All right.
Next slide, please. And I'll try to rip through this. This is a cool slide. So, I think in both of these, and I don't see a lot of people do this, but I think a sim would pay dividends. I think if you, I've done this in CCDC as a red team. I actually set up centralized logging across all of my victim servers, and then I used it for key logging, and then I had what was it? Uh, it was like rsync. I was like rsyncing key logs across the network. Um, so there's a lot of logging protocols. There's a lot of really good logging technologies out there, and it'll pay dividends if you don't have to SSH into every machine, but you can just check a SIM and find a log. It's great for report writing because that's all like static in your system. It's a bunch of data you have saved. Um, Really, really great, especially if it's like Waza or something where it's an EDR2 and then you can directly execute commands or things back on the host system. Bonus, if you set up something like Salt Stack, that can easily grab and shuttle all your logs back for you too. So enterprise tools, really powerful. Next slide. But don't get like caught up in Splunk or something. I don't know. It's expensive. There's bad choices you could make. Don't make bad
Like
choices.
in the class, we're gonna use Waza
Yeah.
and um, yeah, off the top of
Waz
my
is
head. We got
Waz is really
ideas
good.
out of your book.
Yeah. Yeah,
What?
Waz is really good. Graylog's really good.
Yeah.
I also have a workshop out there on the internet called Hunt for Red Apples. And I think, oh, let me see if this, um, sure, I'll send you the link after this. But
Okay.
I think we still have all the logs and there's like free sims hosted with that. And then that'll let you play with like Splunk and I think a few others. But I'll send that over.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Splunk is cool, but it's a lot. I can't imagine using Splunk in a competition.
It's a lot. It's really expensive. I think they give you like 5 gigs for free. And I say all this and it's really funny, but on the CPTC administrative side, we use Splunk. We use Splunk very heavily. It's installed on all the machines. We use Splunk heavy forwarders, but that's because we have licenses. A lot of the guys work at Hurricane Labs, which is like a Splunk consultant shop. So um, we have the infrastructure to support it already. We have Splunk experts that are really good at installing heavy forwarders. So it's just a lot, and if you get into it, it can be a lot of resources too. Um, and so this is a really good slide, but I think both the one of the really strong bottom lines, something I would underline in both these competitions is strong communication. Um, and that in many ways comes down to reports. Like as good as it is to have a strong communication style, both in person for injects and presentations, a lot of what you'll be graded on is written communication. So I think look at those existing reports out there. Uh, just like a really quick tip from a lot of my consulting days, they say you want to write reports in an active voice. So very like verb first. This is what happened. Another good tip from my forensic report writing days is just try to be clinical, to try to document as much as you can around what happened with timestamps. You don't necessarily want to throw your opinion in, especially in places like finding blocks. Like there will be a spot for that under like impact or business assessment. Um, but especially in the narrative, you just kind of want to be clinical in stating what happened, what is the evidence, what is the risk that evidence shows. You don't want to make like large leaps in terms of I can't think of a good example right now, but just try to speak to the risk. Don't exaggerate it, if that makes sense. Um, and try to speak to the things you're actually seeing and say what they do, and then if that could have downstream impact. And obviously, the impact is implied, like from your understanding, but uh, you should lead the horse to water, but not like, say like catastrophic loss of life in situations where you're like chaining exploits together or something like that. That's kind of what I mean. Um,
Okay.
and then just on the right here, I have some where I really highlight like what I like from those report examples because the report examples are just flat. There's no like grading or anything or feedback on them. And in that blog post, I kind of talk about like this is really nice. This is a good feature. Don't do this. That kind of stuff. Next slide, please. So just some key team roles. Yeah, like I think having a team lead or somebody that can kind of tie the whole thing together. This is usually like helps you determine what people are working on, especially helpful in a high pressure situation where you have like multiple competing things to be worked on. It can be helpful to have somebody that's kind of dictating resources. Windows lead is very important. Having somebody with like a lot of Windows technical acumen, extremely important. Same with Linux. Usually like just two different like schools or places like people will train on hardening or IR, even offensive skills. Um, Network lead is usually really helpful. Like in pros versus Joes, we would have one person dedicated to like working the firewall, writing new firewall rules, kind of telling us what the traffic looked like at any given time. Extremely helpful. There's a lot of web apps in these competitions. So on the red team, we almost every year have a floater web app team in CCDC that is from T0 exclusively looking at web apps now. They're trying to find web app phones for us, let us pivot. Uh, could really pay to do the same thing from a defensive perspective. There's a lot of web app vulnerabilities, and a lot of those lead to things like high value data compromises. So, a lot of points in web apps. Um, Biz dev lead. So a few different times at CPTC, I've seen schools with, I would say, like weaker cyber backgrounds and stronger business backgrounds win the competition through presentations, through report writing. Um, and I have come to, over the years, think that this would be a really good dedicated role. Even in my last position at Scale, I was head of security engineering. I didn't have a lot of time to write because I was like in all these meetings all day. So I would use technical writers to write blog posts all the time. On a team, having a technical writer or a writing lead or even somebody that's just organizing the evidence and the intelligence could be really helpful. That could bleed into the next role, but one idea is you could have like a larger picture thinker or like a threat intelligence person. So for CPTC, if your environment is a water treatment plant, they could be putting these findings together and trying to build what are the most critical vulnerabilities, what really matters to the business. This role could also be like the operations lead or the captain or somebody like that. Um, and then or it could even be the floater. But on a lot of my teams, I also have a floater or pressure relief role. This is somebody who's like highly technical, good at many general things, and isn't assigned to any one thing, such that when an incident happens or something very time sensitive happens, they aren't already consumed by something. So these are just some roles that I like on my teams. I've seen them effective. Uh, Happy to talk about them after. Next slide. And then practice. Practice is really important. I would say like basically have small events on your own, put people on the red team, do surprise injects, make sure that whoever is doing the practice scenario isn't the person participating in it so that they can't like kind of know the test, have deadlines, do things under pressure, create hard scenarios that you know your team will fail at, you know, run the gambit of scenarios, things you'll succeed at, things you'll fail at, practice both. I also, this image was AI generated, and for the life of me, I've tried so long, I couldn't get the people on the right to be the same height as the people on the left. Um,
Okay.
they're just tiny.
Yeah. That is a point, isn't it?
I spent forever trying to do it too, and like this was Banana 3, I think it is, which is Gemini's image model, and yeah, the other thing I didn't know at first was how to clear the image chat or context. So it kept layering my images. So like I would have this in the background of another image. It was very strange. Um, but to its credit, I think right now Gemini makes some of the best like humans or photorealistic images compared to like GPT-1,
All right.
ChatGPT's image model.
Except for the people on the left are 7 feet tall.
Yeah, yeah. But they look real. They look
All
like
right.
real short people.
All right. Well, we probably have to, I don't know. Can we go to questions now, do you think? Or is
Yeah,
that okay?
this is
Do
the
you have
last.
anything you want
This
to?
is the last one that I
Okay,
just want
good.
to like.
All right. Good, good, good. So
I
we'll
think
do
this is
this, and then if anyone has questions, we can do that.
cool. Yeah, so this comes from a book called Turn This Ship Around. I think it's a really good communication like style or strategy, but basically it's consensus by exception. So I'm going to do this unless somebody objects, right? And everybody is action oriented. Everybody is executing on what they think is the best possible decision. So like we had that team roster earlier, and you had a captain. What I mean there is the captain is not like top down leadership in the sense that the captain's telling everybody what to do. The captain is just making sure that the right objectives are being worked on and could object if something else is wrong. But really, the team is driving itself. The team knows what needs to be done, and the team is executing on their own. And the team is full of independent executors. I think that's really important and builds really strong teams. Um, and it also puts the captain in the right headspace, which is like you're not controlling this team. There's too much technical stuff happening. You're course correcting, you're helping, you're there to enable and make sure that priorities get addressed. That's it. Let's do questions.
Okay, cool. Anyone have questions? No one has questions. Okay. Wow. All right. Well, um, I will I'll post the slides, and if anyone thinks of questions in the future, um, we can we can ask them, or I don't know if you want me to give out your email or anything, but anyway, let's
Yeah,
go ahead.
you can give the students my email. Let's not put it on the recording. And then people can message me if they have questions. And yeah, there's a lot of links on my website too. I'm easy to get a hold of.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate your time. So I don't know if you thank our speaker. So,
Cool. Thank you all.
all
Good luck
right.
in
And
your careers.
these are actually great. I know this was mostly for CPTC and CCDC, but these are great kind of preparing to be a team kind of advice, right? But anyway, yeah, I want to thank you again. All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All
I'll
right. Thanks, Dan.
hopefully I'll see you all soon in the competitions.
You will see us at those CPTC. Well, I don't know if you see us at CPTC, but and then we'll find out where it is. We don't have to go to Rochester in January anymore. That's like welcome news. But anyway,
Exactly.
all
All right.
right.
I'll see
See
you
ya.
guys soon. If you see me
Bye.
around, come say hi. Bye.
Okay, I will.